Alright, it's been a while, but now we're back and we're talking about Fate, the main cash cow of the Type Moon franchise. I hope you're ready, because we're gonna be stuck here for a very long time. Hooray! Well, as explained in the last video, the Vampire Diaries and the Last Man Standing series both share a similar original timeline, with only one major difference causing the rift between the two timelines. In the Fate universe, Tiefscher Zelrich Schweinberg does not get bit by a dead apostle, meaning that he is able to defeat and destroy the Crimson Moon. With the Crimson Moon being destroyed, it becomes inactive for the rest of eternity. Thus, the 20 dead apostles slowly die out and are no longer going to be brought up ever again. Probably. This then means that Zepia is no longer a vampire in this timeline, therefore is able to become the director of the Atlas Institute. This institute is a group of alchemists doing all sorts of secret magic stuff. As explained in the previous video, true magic does not exist anymore, and people of magic are trying to figure out how to get the true magic back. So, in Japan, the three founding families, Tosaka, Meito, and the Ainsburns, form a plan. They're to create a ritual to recover the third magic lost by the Ainz. With the third magic, they can try to access the root, also known as heaven, or also known as a place that exists outside of time that contains unfathomable power. Now, why does this all happen in Japan, other than the fact that this is a Japanese company with Japanese writers creating everything? Well, there's also an in-universe reason as well. The church and the mages are at war, and the families needed a quiet, isolated area to do their deeds. Coincidentally, Japan was actually historically in an isolation state during these centuries, so things kind of work out. So, the Einsteins provide the alchemy needed to create and prepare the vessel for the Grail. The Tosakas provided the necessary land and called forth the servants. And the Matos assembled the mate trap to stabilize the starting materials and design the command spells to be able to command the servants. Justige Lizrich von Einsberg devised the Holy Grail War and became part of the ritual, the Greater Grail, which is what the Holy Grail is, but stronger. It was created with her being the key to reenacting the third magic. Her will would enact the heavens feel. We'll get to that. Only the Tosakas wanted to reach the Akasha, while the Einsbergs and the Meito family only wanted the completion of the Grail, so they can revive the powerful third magic. Now, the Holy Grail works a bit like this. Looking at the image, let me go through it. The Great Grail requires around 60 years in order to amass enough mana to summon the servants. If the Grail is unable to utilize all of its energy, the leftovers can be used to reduce the time for the next Holy Grail War. While the Grail does favor using the members of the three families to participate in the war, the Grail will select potential masters from anywhere. Traditionally, there are 7 potential masters, but there can always be more. But only the first 7 who manage to summon servants gain the command spells. Others can gain the right to act as masters by contracting with masterless servants. We'll get to that. The servants can also be summoned in advance if need be. We'll get to that. Well, the Holy Grail War is viewed by most as a battle royal that grants the winner a wish. The real point, as said before, was to fill the vessel of the Grail with the souls of all 7 servants, each with a different class. The defeated servants then revert to pure energy, and with that pure energy juice, this will power up the Grail. Once the vessel is filled, all the energy collected from the heroic spirits would be used to try to open a hole to the root. And in theory, both third magic and the mystical Heavenland will be accessed. Now, with that explained, let's begin with the First Holy Grail War. The First Holy Grail War took place in 1810, but it's not really a war. It was only meant to be a ritual for the families to reach the Akasha. It took 10 years from its establishment to even gather the necessary energies to manifest. Upon completion, the three families realized that the system could only allow one person to utilize it. So because of this, they broke off their alliance with each other. And then the families decided to create the Heaven's Field system to summon the Grail, and then fight for it amongst themselves. Due to requiring 7 heroic spirits to complete the ritual and 7 masters to summon them, families had to bring out 4 other magic men to help participate in this war. The other magic men were obviously excited over the proposition of having a magical wish-granting artifact. So, of course, they joined in as well. Though the results of the war were really nothing. Very little was accomplished and the Grail was never even won by anyone. So, then in the 1860s, they tried again for the Second Holy Grail War. Though, unlike last time where there was very little combat, this time there was too much of it. Everyone played died, and no winners were found again. So, the definition of sanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, this is what the Holy Grail War is. But at the very least, the three families decided that maybe they should at least make some home rules to at least control the damage a little bit. It, as you may already know, does not really work. But anyways, up to the Third Holy Grail War. So, when is the setting for the Third Holy Grail War anyways? Well, let's see. Okay. So, the Third Holy Grail War is held in 1939. Wait, what else happened around that time? Oh, oh, no.
We don't want to go to war today.
So, fascism aside, and the real life history behind that period aside as well, um, the story is relatively simple, except for the fact that there are, at the very least, three different major timelines that we know about, probably four, depending on how you look at it. To make matters worse, they all lead to their own universes and have their own major storylines. So this is where the problem starts when you try to describe the fate chronologically, because they all do start at the same time, and they all end up in different places, so what do I start with? Do I start with one timeline and go until where we know it ends? Because there's a couple more things that happen following this Holy Grail War. Or do I stop at the end of this Holy Grail War, go back where the Holy Grail War begins, and then talk about that was the new, different timeline? Are you getting confused on my description of how I should be describing the Fate series and the Holy Grail Wars? Good. You're on the right track. So, if you want, take some notes, because it's gonna get a bit more confusing after this. Arguably, this is the most cohesive Holy Grail War that you can follow. I'm gonna talk about each main branch of the Third Holy Grail War, and then anything that happens after the Holy Grail War, I'll talk about later when I get there on the timeline. Main timeline and the subsequent timeline I'm gonna talk about briefly now is that there is one major difference. The Einstein summoned this rather edgy boy named Anra Manu. He's an Avenger class, which is not normally summoned, but the Einstein messed around with a ritual bit to create the Avenger class. And as the name suggests, they are people who want the Revenge. More about this guy specifically later, because in this divergence, the Einstein summoned a different class of servant altogether instead. They summon a man named Amakusa Shiro Tokisada. Don't ask me why his name is also Shiro, it will only bring pain. He is actually based upon a real person named Masuda Shiro Tokisada, a Japanese Catholic during the Edo periods of the 1620s and 30s. If you know a bit about Japanese history and culture, you might realize that being Catholic wasn't very popular. Tokisada was said to be a charismatic leader of the Shimibara Rebellion, an uprising of the Japanese Roman Catholics against the shogunate. His name after baptism was Geronimo, and was later also known as Francisco. I don't know why. Though most people in his army fought because of famine and poverty, less so because of their religion. His uprising, however, was not very successful, as his army of 40,000 was eventually slain and his head was apparently displayed on a pike in Nagasaki. But because he was a man of God and used a religious poster to raise morale for his troops during that time, Type Moon had perfect excuse needed to call him fellow magic man. As a real class, they aren't actually meant to be in the war, and their jobs are essentially just to sit and watch and make sure people follow the rules. Spoilers, much like his uprising, he wasn't very successful. Anyways, Shiro's around, and he works for the Einsburns, even though the rules say he really shouldn't, but the rules got changed. To make a long story short, due to the fact that we don't really know the details of how this war went on, it didn't really work out. Neither did the other war going on for Japan at the time, too. Shiro, however, survives all this by coming into contact with the Greater Grail and managing to receive an incarnation, meaning that he now had a physical vessel, not tied to the Grail itself, stopping him from dematerializing at the end of the war. Uh, from both wars, I guess. Hmm. Now, at the end of this war, Donnik Prestone Yugadamalinia, I don't know how this is pronounced, A bad German magic man found a location in the Great Grail and then stole it. Three families and the Japanese Imperial Army fought to thwart the theft, but they were still exhausted from fighting the Third Holy Grail War and failed to do so. After the successful extraction, Darnak then betrayed the evil Germans and took the Greater Grail to Romania so that he would be able to repair his own Holy Grail War in 60 years' time. We will talk about all of this much later on. Back to the beginning of the Third Holy Grail War now. Now, back to the more normalized timeline. The actual servant that has been summoned is an Avenger named Anramanyu. Now, he isn't the Anramanyu that they wanted to summon, as they wanted the Zoroastrian god, Anramanyu. But this Anramanyu, however, was not very powerful and died very quickly into the war. The naughty Germans and the naughty Japanese continued on their war. However, Anra infected the Greater Grail and corrupted it, while the Lesser Grail was destroyed and the Elderfeld family left Japan. Now, there is a bit more detail over the specifics of what happened over the Third Holy Grail War. It just depends on how much you can take this next part seriously.
今宿命のライバルが激突する
Here we talk about Fate Kohai Ace, the best timeline. The source in which we get to see the most of this war is used in the Kohai Ace series, also Fate Red Light, which is based off Kohai Ace but more serious. But also Fate Redline isn't completely finished yet, so mostly it's going to be about Kohai Ace, because we know how it ends. So considering how often I make videos, it might be done by the time I post this. Kohai Ace is a gag manga that was created back in the ancient days of 2012, back when the world was supposed to explode or something. It featured chibi-fied versions of popular characters through their games and stories, going through all sorts of wild hijinks. In 2015, the new flag show to bring the Fate series into the future, Fate Grand Order, was being released. So of course, Kohai Ace, the gag manga, had to create their own storyline to help advertise the brand new game. Now, the characters of Kohai Ace, who are usually female leads in their other stories, go on and reenact the war. Yes, they also reenact Second World War at the same time. Hmm. Most of these people are Japanese, right? Hmm. Fate Redline is much more serious version of this thing, so of course they create their own original characters to make sure that the story is cohesive and not a joke. So the major difference here is instead of established characters going on their wacky expeditions, in Redline, the main protagonist accidentally winds up back in time, and Kohai Ace just features the two main heroines from Tsukihime, Akiha and Kohaku. These two characters are probably now mostly faded into obscurity when it comes to popular culture. They're not fake characters, so no one really cares, I guess. Also, get it? Kohai Ace, Kohaku, clues in the name, that's how it started off. A, A. So, as you might know already from my Saber Face video, go watch it if you haven't, Okita Soji was meant to be Artoria being summoned, but she got weebified. So, Okita, on the brand new OC Do Not Steal, fighting with whatever master she has. She faces off against the naughty Germans and the misbehaving Japanese. So, she saves her master from an evil lancer, then encounters the strange and evil Nobugana. Look at her, absolutely devious. After a fight to a standstill, the heroes then gather themselves as the villains continue their plot. Imperialist Shinji, that's right, you heard me. There's another reason to hate that character specifically. Prepares his weapons while a mysterious assassin attacks Okita's master's friends. But she is able to get in and intervene in time and save the day. The heroes then work together with the mysterious rider class duo, all the while more servants rear their heads and continue on their own various adventures. Shinji's berserker then proceeds to go berserk and kill everyone, but they're all bad guys that he kills, so it's not too terrible. Eventually, servant Li Shuwen teams together with Okita to defeat the evil berserker, while Nobu unleashes her full power. Her strength proves too much for Okita and their rider ally servant, Sakamoto Ryoma, to handle, and they are put on the rope until they are miraculously saved by the Germans. Hooray, I guess. The Germans use an evil mass-produced army of artificial servants to fight Nobu, but they fail. Her power is too overwhelming, and she destroys them all. But the heroes use this time to escape and wind up in the secret German lab facility and manage to take away this strange Grail-like item. Nobu then catches up to them, and Sakamoto stays to hold them off, unleashing a special power to try and defeat her. He unfortunately fails. Li Shuen is who I guess is this war's true lancer or maybe assassin, who knows, I don't know, faces off against the German side servants, taking out their assassin before the German caster escapes. He's not German per se, he just works for the German team. Nobu then refines Okita and they once more battle again. This time it is victory for Okita. However, before Nobu is finished, Caster then emerges and reveals that the Grail-like capsule they were carrying was actually the deadly corrupted mud that leaks out of the Holy Grail. Using it, he creates a monster, and together Okita, Nobu, and Shuen fight the evil monster, but they do not prove to have enough strength to defeat it. Eventually, Nobu comes up with a plan and sacrifices herself and Shuen to empower the Grail and use the Grail to transform Okita into an altered, powerful form. Finally, with this new power, she is able to slay the monster and caster, thus ending the Holy Grail War. Except that we don't really know how canon this war is, so take it on how you will. But the result of this war was much like others, in the fact that no one truly managed to get what they wanted from the Holy Grail. Not all servants were defeated, and the Holy Grail was used to get rid of its own evil magic mud. So once more, Family of Mages wind up with no third magic and no Akasha. So a new Holy Grail War must be rescheduled, though due to the shenanigans of the third Holy Grail War, people could now summon monsters. That's probably not going to be relevant. And thus ends the trilogy of the first three Holy Grail Wars, all of them winding up to be completely useless and needlessly caused multiple deaths and prolonged a bunch of blood feuds. That only means that the eventual winner of the Holy Grail War will feel that much better, right? Right? Well, anyways, it's going to take another 60 years for the next war, so everyone's going to have plenty of time to prepare. I mean, it's not going to be much worse, right? Right? And at the very least, can't get any more complicated than this.